Hi, I'm Pete Townshend. I'm just about to smash the iHeartRadio box. This is Who Came First. This is sort of my first solo album. It wasn't really meant to be a solo album. What I'd done is I'd made some albums with some friends of mine who were followers of an Indian master called Meher Baba. And we made these albums about this guy. I don't know whether you can see, his nose was smashed up in a car crash. He was much prettier than that when he was young. But anyway, Decca, my record label at the time, got fed up with the fact that these albums were bootlegged, and they said, Pete, we want to put these out. So they gave me $150,000. I gave it away to charity, to some related charities, and made this album. And it's got some nice stuff on it. It's got the original song, Pure and Easy, from the Lifehouse Project, a song called Evolution that I recorded with my best buddy at the time, Ronnie Lane, from the Small Faces and the Faces. I don't know if you know him, but if you don't, you really want to check him out. Forever's No Time at All was written by my friend Billy Nichols, who was the MD for The Who many years. Time is Passing, another song, and Let's See Action, which was also songs from the Lifehouse Project. Now, the Lifehouse Project was a science fiction project that I did. It failed, it bombed, but it did bring the songs Won't Get Fooled Again, Behind Blue Eyes, Barbara O'Reilly, for The Who's next album, so you'll know that. Play video.
For about a year, I thought I was just copying my hero, literally just copying. Anyway, I then saw the Stones 2 or 3 times more, and Keith wasn't doing it. I went up to him and I said to him something like, do you mind that I copied, your arm swinging technique? And he looked at me like I was a germ, and I realised that he didn't remember doing it.
I started swinging my arm. It was my first gimmick. Pretty much, I think, probably before guitar smashing, I used to have 2 stunts. One was, I was called Birdman when early mod days, so 1964, 65, used to get my amplifier feeding back, and I'd stand like this and pretend to be an airplane. It was all kind of, about war and those noises of war. And another one was a pose like this, and then I would start to swing my arm. And where it came from was we supported the Stones in the early days, 1963. They were still breaking. We weren't even called The Who then. We were called The High Numbers. And as the curtain opened, Keith Richard from backstage was warming up. He was stretching. He was kind of going like that. And then he went like this. And I thought, wow, what a great movement. So I copied it. I was really a big Keith Richards fan. Copied it for a couple of times. And then I saw them a few times later, and he wasn't doing it. So I thought, it's mine. I can have it for the rest of my life. And nobody does it quite like I do. Right, there's a black box, and in the box is a banjo, yeah. Oh, what a great little thing. Oh, beautiful, beautifully made little toy banjo. Yeah, that was my first instrument. In fact, John Entwistle, who was the bass player in The Who, and I were in a band, a traditional jazz band. Now, traditional jazz was really the music of the great legend Louis Armstrong. And Louis Armstrong became a film star and somebody that we know Satchmo from his voice, and all this. But he was in New Orleans jazz player, great trumpet player, but also all of his songs were part of the jazz scene in the UK. So I knew all those songs. And a couple of years ago, I got to play in New Orleans at I think it's called Foundation Hall or Memorial Hall or whatever it was with the jazz band. And I got my old banjo and I was managing to play all these jazz songs. It was great. And then I caught COVID. The trumpet player kissed me and I got COVID. This one's live at Leeds. At the time, critics called it the best rock and roll live album that there had ever been. It still stands up. I'm not much of a shredder. I left the shredding to the bass player, to John Entwistle, Keith Moon was kind of all over the place as a drummer, rhythmically, so it was up to me to keep the beat. So I didn't bother to learn fancy solos, but I had a go on Live at Leeds. But the best thing about Live at Leeds was that I recorded it, and I mixed it, in my home studio in Twickenham, where I lived in London. I had a new Neve desk, a small one, which I've still got to this day, and brought the faders up. It was only 8-track, so it was easy to mix, and great sounding record. I think the reason we made this was because Decca were complaining about bootlegs. They were always complaining about bootlegs. A sailing hat. It's probably getting out now a little bit that I like sailing. I don't know about captain's hats. I'm not much of a captain. I have got the qualifications to captain, skipper a boat, but I prefer to be a passenger. I do race. I race in what are called classic boats. And this watch here is my present for 4 first positions in a race in the Pockerolls. It was early this year. I went to the Pockerolls and I raced in my little boat there. I've got a small boat. And we came first 4 times, and I got a watch. Eddie Vedder, really great friend of mine now. You know, I love Pearl Jam. I loved their first album when it came out, and we got together quite a lot for a Chicago charity called Maryville. Now, Maryville was a charity which looked after orphan children, and it was run by a guy called Father Smith, spelt with a Y, who was a big, tall guy of about 80 years old, who had been a basketball player, and he was really tall. He was 6'4". And Eddie and I did about 4 or 5 charity concerts at the Hard Rock in Chicago for Maryville. And then since then, Eddie has turned up to work with The Who maybe a dozen times, if I call, and I'm hoping to work with Eddie for his charity, and he does concerts every year, and I'm hoping to do one with him. He's a great guy, absolutely great guy. Roger Daltrey and I famously don't get on, but in actual fact, we do get on. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been in the same band for so long. What we don't get on about is that we're different. We're just very different. We have different political ideas. But on this last tour that we just did of the US, the legendary farewell tour, don't believe what you read on the ticket, the farewell tour, I decided that we were doing, this is the first time we were doing a tour without orchestra. We'd done 2 tours with a big orchestra, doing just the old way with just a band on the stage, that I was going to try to make Roger's time on the stage as happy as possible. And guess what? It worked for me, because the happier I made him, the happier he seemed to be about what I was doing. He gave me lots of space on the stage to play crazy solos, and my solos are mainly bum notes. So anyway, we're getting on really well at the moment, and we will do stuff together in the future. We'll certainly do charity stuff together. We might do private shows, who knows? You know, we will continue to make music. Oh wow, they're nice. When I was 3.5, I took ballet lessons. I lived in West London, and I took ballet lessons for, I think, about 18 months. And I was a tiny little kid, but I was in a class, I was the only boy in a class of about 24 girls. And as I remember them, and I can remember them vaguely, they were all stunningly pretty. And I was a pretty little boy. I had blonde hair. I was very pretty when I was young. Before my new nose grew, I was very pretty. One day I got into trouble, and I did something that I wasn't supposed to do. And the ballet mistress, who was a hard nut, took me up against the wall and pulled my little pants down and slippered me with one of these. And I didn't mind particularly. I was a bit embarrassed, but I didn't really mind. I was too young to be an exhibitionist, but I told my mum and dad, and it was my dad who said, "I told you this ballet thing was a waste of time," so they took me out. But, you know, I've always had a a ballet dancer in me somewhere. So now we're bringing Quadrophenia rock ballet to New York at the New York City Centre. And I can't plug it because you're probably not going to be able to see it if you haven't bought tickets already. But we will bring it back, hopefully on tour at some point in the future somehow. And I know Americans like to say, we're so excited. Well, I am genuinely excited about this. And it's such a great piece of work. My wife, Rachel, orchestrated The Who's album, recorded this score for it. So it's an orchestral score. And young dancers, and the story of Quadrophenia has really been brought to life in a new way. It feels modern. It feels about today. It feels a lot about some of the things that young people are going through today. Self-examination, trying to find their pathway, gender issues, sexual issues, issues about climate change, the wars that are going on, all of this stuff. Being young today is tough. On top of that, you've got social media, which means that everybody's checking everybody out, and whenever they make a mistake, everybody knows. So this ballet is about that, and it's brought it into the present day, and I hope one day you get to see it because it's remarkable. That's everything that was in the iHeartRadio box. Thanks for watching.